Have you ever looked at something like a piece of art, and the longer you look at it, you begin to understand that whatever you're looking at seems to have changed from your first impression? I mean, it's still what it was when you first saw it, but your understanding of it grows larger and the longer you look at it. Well, today, Jesus is looking at the behavior of people, and particularly sinful behavior, which can be actually hard to understand. And he's telling us that in order for us to be truly happy, as he intended us to be from the beginning, it isn't enough to merely avoid specific sins. And he uses the sins of murder and adultery as his examples, but he's really talking about all 10 of the commandments. And he also includes a point about speech and the taking of oaths. Now, we just heard an abbreviated version of our gospel reading because I wanted to speak about something specific, but you need to know the context of what Jesus was talking about. And he was talking about the law that Moses gave the people, the 10 commandments. And Jesus is here today speaking about them. And in speaking about them, he's showing that there are aspects of the Old Testament that are not perfect. They're not what God ultimately wants for his people. They were, and they are, a standard of righteousness or good behavior, but they were and remain a lower standard for what would be considered the law of righteous behavior. And Jesus today is perfecting that law, transforming it into a new law, the law of the good news, the law of the gospel. And he makes it very clear that his mission is the fulfillment of the law of the Old Testament. And he says, which you didn't hear, that he did not come to abolish the law, but to perfect it. And where Moses prohibited murder, you shall not kill, Jesus perfects that law and goes so far as to forbid even anger and insults. Now, he's not undoing the law against murder. He's driving it more deeply into the human heart and getting to the root cause of murder, which is ultimately wrath and anger and bad will, a desire to harm someone else because they've done something wrong or have hurt us or whatever might be its motivation. And he is actually forbidding our consenting to that anger and strong emotion. And here's the thing. We don't often get to pick and choose when we get angry. It's an emotion that in many ways is involuntary. It just happens. But Jesus is telling us, he's warning us actually, that we can't give into it because sin is rooted in the heart. It's the very center of who and what we are. And then Jesus goes on to speak about adultery, having relations with another person's spouse, which breaks the marital relationship. Jesus takes the commandment a step or two forward to forbid even lustful looks. And he tells us that everyone who looks at a woman with lust has already committed adultery with her in his heart. Now, in the Bible, the heart is not just where our emotions come from. It's even more where we make up our minds, where we decide what's going to happen. It's the place where we choose. It's the deepest part of the person, and it's where we choose for or against God, where we choose good or evil. And it's where we give our consent. And even though adultery has not been physically committed, Jesus says that we are quite capable of committing it in the heart. Now, attraction to other people is natural and normal. And again, we don't often get to pick and choose who we're attracted to. And so it's often an involuntary thing. It just happens. And so Jesus is not so much talking about that, about what we experience when we're attracted to someone who's not your spouse. He's talking about what we do with that attraction. He's telling us that our struggle with sin is not just a physical thing in the body and in our behavior, but in the heart, which is where sin has its origins and beginnings. And he's telling us that we have to struggle and wrestle against our impulses and emotions when they take us to places that we do not want to go. And then Jesus talks about oath taking. And here he's telling us about the importance of speaking the truth. He says, yes means yes, and no means no. And he's emphasizing that speech is a gift, and it's designed for us to speak the truth and nothing less than that. In each of his examples, Jesus is pointing to our freedom to choose between two extremes, between good and evil. And we hear echoes of this in our first reading from the book of Sirach. And it's basically a meditation on free will, our ability to make choices, and the fact that we do have free will. But the reading also says that God knows everything, all that we think and do, and that someday we'll be judged on those things. And so he's telling us that we have to take these things seriously, and he's reminding us that we're responsible for our actions, and so we should choose well. And he's inviting us to find out what motivates us, what drives us. Our deep emotions and feelings are neither good nor bad in themselves, and sometimes we simply take them for granted, if even we recognize them to begin with. Also, again, they're frequently spontaneous, and so we don't always get to pick and choose them. However, Jesus is telling us today to pay attention to what is going on deep inside us, those hidden things which reveal themselves in how we behave and how we relate to each other. In our second reading, St. Paul talks about the Holy Spirit, who alone can reach even the depths of God. And it's that same Holy Spirit who can also reach our own hidden depths. And something of God resides within each of us. And so we have to ask the Holy Spirit to help us find what drives us and to help correct us when we choose unwisely. Because what Jesus is calling us to do is to have a heart like his, to have emotions, thoughts, and attitudes that are shaped by the Holy Spirit himself. And then all the choices we make will correspond to God's will for our lives, and the way we live will be life-giving, both for ourselves and for those around us. And here's a little prayer that you can say. Come, Holy Spirit, fill my heart and enkindle in me the fire of your love. Come, Holy Spirit, fill my heart and enkindle in me the fire of your love. Now, each of us could use a little help in understanding what's going on deep inside our hearts, what it is that drives and motivates us to do what we do. And the fact is that Jesus has not left us without help in getting us to better understand what's going on there. And the Holy Spirit is just the one to help make that happen. Come, Holy Spirit, fill my heart and enkindle in me the fire of your love.